In May 1974, the calm atmosphere of a small Florida neighborhood was shattered by the sound of gunfire. Despite witness statements, the case went cold for decades. Freddie Farah was born in 1940. At the age of 34, he had already established a stable and meaningful life for himself. He was married to Nadia Farah, the woman who shared in his dreams and stood beside him through the ups and downs of life. Together, they built a loving home and were blessed with 4 children, each of whom he adored deeply. His family meant everything to him, and those who knew him described him as a caring and dependable husband and father. Freddie was also a hard-working man, dedicated to providing for his loved ones. He owned and managed the Grand Park Food Store, a small but popular convenience store located at 2361 Kings Road in Jacksonville, Florida. Everything in Freddie's life seemed to be moving forward peacefully. His business was steady, his family life was filled with love, and his future appeared bright. But beneath that calm surface, fate had something unimaginable in store. Freddie had no idea that a terrible danger was slowly approaching. On May 22, 1974, tragedy struck the life of Freddie. That day began like any other, with Freddie tending to his customers and managing his daily business operations. However, the calm routine was abruptly shattered when an unknown suspect entered the convenience store and demanded money from him. What started as a robbery quickly escalated into a violent encounter that would end in heartbreak. As the confrontation unfolded, Freddie moved away from the cash register, attempting to comply or perhaps diffuse the tension. The assailant then moved in front of the counter, closing the distance between them. Without hesitation, the suspect pulled out a firearm and opened fire, striking Freddie. The police were quickly dispatched to the scene following reports of the shooting. Emergency responders arrived promptly and found Freddie gravely injured. Despite their immediate efforts, Freddie's condition was critical. He was rushed to the hospital in hopes that his life could be saved, but sadly, his injuries proved too severe. Freddie was pronounced deceased, leaving behind his wife, children, and a devastated community mourning the sudden loss of a man known for his kindness and dedication. In the aftermath of the tragedy, law enforcement began an intensive investigation to identify the person responsible for the senseless act. The officers collected evidence from the store and began interviewing potential witnesses. One witness who had been inside the store during the incident reported hearing the suspect shout, "Give it to me," or "This is a holdup," moments before the shooting took place. The same witness described seeing a black male fleeing the store immediately after the gunfire, running out the door and disappearing from sight. Strangely, despite the apparent robbery attempt, the suspect did not take any money from the cash register or anywhere else in the store. This unusual detail puzzled the investigators and suggested that something may have gone wrong during the attempted robbery, or that the crime might not have been motivated purely by theft. The investigators had very little to work with beyond a few fingerprints collected from the crime scene and the witness statements recorded at the time. As years turned into decades, the file on Freddie's case grew cold, leaving his family and the Jacksonville community without closure. In 2016, more than 4 decades after Freddie's life was tragically taken, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit decided to revisit the case using advanced forensic technology unavailable at the time of the original investigation. The detectives turned their attention to the evidence that had been preserved from 1974, including several fingerprints collected from the scene of the crime. With the help of the modern automated fingerprint identification system and newly expanded databases containing millions of digitized prints, the investigators hoped that technology might finally reveal what years of searching could not. Their efforts soon paid off. In 2017, the Cold Case Unit received a long-awaited breakthrough. One of the fingerprints from the original evidence matched those of Johnny Lewis Miller, who was by then a 60-year-old street performer living in New Orleans, Louisiana. Miller's fingerprints were already stored in the system due to prior unrelated arrests, and it was this digital trail that finally linked him to this case. In May 2017, Miller was arrested in New Orleans under an out-of-state warrant for second-degree slaying and attempted armed robbery. The arrest marked a major milestone for both the investigators who had kept the case alive and for the Farah family, who had waited more than 40 years for justice. During police interviews, Miller reportedly admitted to being involved in the fatal robbery attempt, though he did not provide full details about the incident. His partial confession later became part of a plea negotiation. In April 2018, Miller agreed to plead guilty to a lesser manslaughter-type charge rather than face a full trial for slaying. As part of the plea agreement, his sentence was set to time served, which amounted to the 344 days he had already spent in jail since his arrest. This legal resolution, while controversial to some, finally brought an official close to the decades-old case. A unique aspect of the plea deal required Miller to meet directly with members of the Farah family. During this meeting, he was expected to explain his actions and express remorse for the pain caused by his crime, an act intended to promote a form of restorative justice. For the Farah family, it was a bittersweet moment. Though no punishment could ever undo their loss, they were at least able to hear the truth from the man responsible for taking Freddie's life. Following the resolution of the case, law enforcement officials released a statement acknowledging the perseverance and dedication of the cold case unit. They stated, "We are happy to have been able to support the Farah family and will continue to do so through the court process. We also want to extend our sincere appreciation to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and their cold case team. 43 years is a long time, and we are so thankful that they took the time to review and reprocess this case. They remind us why, against all odds, against all logic, we still hope." Freddie's only son said, "People may ridicule me for saying this, but I almost feel sorry for him. He came from nothing and he is going back to nothing. It does me no good to have him sit in jail. Now I have my questions answered. I was a 6-year-old kid, and I needed answers. So now I'm at peace." As Miller left the court, he mouthed the words, "Thank you," to the family. Bobby responded with a thumbs up. In May 1998, a building manager in the San Francisco's Diamond Heights neighborhood uncovered a horrifying scene. Despite numerous leads and interviews, the case went cold. Lisa Christine Valdez was born on September 6, 1961 in San Francisco, California. As an adult, Lisa pursued a career as a computer programmer. Outside of work, Lisa cherished spending time with family. One evening, she decided to host a small dinner party at her Diamond Heights condo. The gathering was intimate, just Lisa, her mother, and her mother's boyfriend enjoying each other's company over a quiet meal. For Lisa, it was another opportunity to celebrate the closeness she held dear. A simple night meant for good food and warm conversation. But as the evening unfolded, an unseen danger loomed on the horizon. On May 20th, 1998, the building manager of Lisa's condo made a horrifying discovery. After investigating a foul odor coming from her unit, he noticed that the door was slightly open and decided to check inside. What he found would shock the entire community. Inside the home, the authorities soon confirmed that Lisa was deceased, her body showing signs that she had been lifeless for several days. The scene was brutal and chaotic, suggesting a violent struggle and a frenzied attack. Lisa had been stabbed more than 20 times in her upper body and face, the sheer number of wounds revealing the level of rage behind the assault. She also bore defensive injuries on her hands, indicating that she had fought desperately for her life. Because of the advanced state of decomposition, the investigators could not determine whether she had been indecently assaulted. The bedroom was soaked in blood, especially on the mattress and pillows, testifying to the savagery of the crime. Adding to the disturbing nature of the scene, Lisa's long hair had been cut, leading the investigators to believe the perpetrator may have taken it as a trophy. As the investigation began, Lisa's mother provided critical information to the authorities. She told them that she had last seen her daughter on the night of May 16th, when Lisa hosted the dinner party for her and her boyfriend. They had spent the evening together, and Lisa appeared happy and relaxed. Her mother left around midnight, unaware that it would be the last time anyone would see Lisa alive. The next day, Lisa missed her regular dance class, something highly unusual for her. For days later, her body was discovered. Lisa's mother also told the investigators that her daughter took great pride in her long hair and would have never willingly cut it. This detail supported the police theory that the perpetrator was responsible for the disturbing act. A neighbor further contributed to the timeline. reporting that around 1:26 a.m. on May 17th, they heard a loud noise followed by the sound of someone running down the stairs. Around the same time, Lisa's computer was abruptly turned off, which led the detectives to conclude that she was likely attacked shortly after the dinner party ended. Forensic analysis revealed the presence of male DNA in the blood evidence collected at the scene, along with latent fingerprints on the bathroom toilet seat. The investigators also interviewed Lisa's housekeeper, who said that she had visited the condo on May 18th, 2 days after the dinner party. The housekeeper recalled seeing Lisa's body on the floor and hearing a male voice inside the home. Believing that she had interrupted something, she quickly left without realizing the gravity of what she had witnessed. The detectives pursued several persons of interest, testing their DNA against the evidence collected from the crime scene. Each one was eventually ruled out, leaving the investigators without a match. The male DNA and fingerprints failed to match anyone in existing databases. Despite the initial leads and physical evidence, the investigation slowly lost momentum. Without new information or suspects, the once active case eventually went cold. In 2011, more than a decade after Lisa's demise, the investigators received an unexpected hit through Cody's. The DNA profile recovered from the bloody crime scene matched that of a man named Anthony Quinn Hughes, who was about 52 years old at the time. The match came after Hughes was arrested in San Francisco for a shoplifting charge, during which his DNA and fingerprints were collected and entered into the system. What began as a minor offense suddenly reopened one of the city's most haunting cold cases. The investigators confirmed the match through multiple lines of evidence. Along with the DNA link, a fingerprint lifted from the toilet seat inside Lisa's condo matched Hughes' middle finger. This physical evidence placed him directly at the scene of the crime, even though his name had never appeared in the original investigation. The sudden emergence of a suspect after so many years stunned both the detectives and those who had long followed the unsolved case. When Hughes was brought in for questioning, he initially denied knowing Lisa at all. However, as the interrogation continued, he eventually admitted that he had known her during their teenage years. He claimed that they had dated briefly in high school and said that he had run into her once in the 1980s, but insisted he had not seen her since. Despite his denials, the investigators found his explanations inconsistent with the mounting physical evidence linking him to Lisa's case. One critical detail stood out to the detectives. There were no signs of forced entry into Lisa's condo. This suggested that she had willingly allowed her perpetrator inside, indicating that the person responsible was someone she knew and trusted. When the investigators presented Hughes with the forensic findings, his demeanor shifted dramatically. In a shocking moment during questioning, he asked for a pen and then stabbed himself in the chest and neck before the officers managed to subdue and save him. His violent reaction further raised suspicions about his guilt. Evidence at the crime scene also suggested that Hughes may have remained in Lisa's home for more than a day after ending her life, before fleeing. The state of the apartment and certain forensic indicators supported this unsettling theory. Eventually, in December 2015, the case proceeded to trial, where Hughes was convicted of first-degree slaying. However, the charge of attempted assault ended in a mistrial due to insufficient evidence. Following his conviction, Hughes filed a motion seeking a new trial. The judge ultimately reduced the conviction from first-degree to second-degree slaying, citing procedural factors and the complexities surrounding the intent behind the crime. In 2016, Anthony Hughes was sentenced to 16 years to life in prison. Records later confirmed that he was incarcerated at the California healthcare facility in Stockton, San Joaquin County. In 1972, a 21-year-old man set out on a journey from New York to California but failed to return home. The case would only be solved decades later after effort made by a concerned family member. Robert Hutton was born in 1951. At the age of 21, he had taken on work in the construction industry. In 1972, when Robert failed to return home, worry quickly turned into fear. His mother waited, hoping for word or a sign of his whereabouts. But as the days passed with no contact, she knew something was wrong. She went to the police authorities and filed a missing person report, desperate for help in finding her son. The investigation began immediately, with the officers gathering what little information they could about his recent movements. Robert's mother told the police that he had been traveling from New York to California at the time of his disappearance. He often relied on hitchhiking or traveling by bus to get from place to place, a common practice for young men of that era seeking to see more of the country. It was not unusual for him to be on the road, but this time was different. He had vanished without a trace. Her account gave the investigators their first direction, but it also raised serious concern given the dangers of cross-country travel. Unfortunately, despite the detectives' best efforts, the case went cold. In 2011, almost 4 decades after Robert's case was opened, a new effort began under the direction of the Cook County Sheriff's Office to identify the unnamed victims of John Wayne Gacy. Gacy's crimes had shocked the nation. He was convicted of 33 crimes in 1980 and later executed in 1994. Each of his victims had been a young man, many of them traveling alone, trusting and unaware of the fate that awaited them. The timeline of Gacy's cases stretched from 1972 to 1978, years marked by the disappearance of many young men. Most of their bodies had been discovered buried in the crawl space beneath Gacy's home in Norwood Park, Illinois. The gruesome discovery had left the authorities with the difficult task of identifying all the victims, some of whom were never matched to a name or family. It was a painstaking process that continued long after Gacy's conviction. Decades had passed since Gacy's arrest and execution, but advances in DNA technology and renewed public interest gave investigators new tools to work with. They invited families of missing persons from the 1970s to come forward, submit DNA samples, and share any information that might help match the unidentified remains to a name. It was a wide-reaching effort to finally bring closure to families who had been waiting for answers. Among the families who responded was Robert Hutton's. His sister submitted his name to authorities as a possible Gacy victim, believing it was finally time to find out what had happened to her brother after all those years. The investigators noted that Robert fit the general profile of many of Gacy's victims. He was young, on the road, and often hitchhiked or took the bus, patterns that matched those of others who had fallen prey to Gacy. The fact that Robert was traveling across the country, likely passing through Chicago during that period, raised unsettling possibilities. The more the authorities looked into it, the more it seemed plausible that Robert's disappearance might be connected. The investigators began following the lead, using updated records and resources unavailable in the 1970s. Their search led them to a man named Robert Hutton living in Colorado, who shared the same basic identifying information as the missing young man. From there, the trail extended further west, eventually reaching rural Montana. It was there that the authorities located the man who had once been presumed deceased, alive and living quietly under the same name. In April, the investigators confirmed that this man was indeed the same Robert Hutton who had disappeared in 1972. When questioned, Robert told the police that he had simply gotten caught up in the lifestyle of the 1970s. He explained that as the years went by, embarrassment over having lost contact with his family made it easier to continue avoiding them. What had begun as youthful freedom slowly turned into decades of silence. Robert also shared that he had made attempts to reconnect in the 1980s and 1990s, but had difficulty finding his relatives after so much time apart. Ironically, he never knew that the owner of a nearby bar, just a few miles from where he lived, was his stepmother's brother. The years had separated him from his past so completely that even familiar faces and connections were hidden in plain sight. After being found, Robert reunited with his father and sister, closing a chapter that had remained open for nearly 40 years. The confirmation that he was alive brought both shock and relief to his family, who had long feared the worst. With Robert's reappearance, the missing person case that had once linked him to one of America's most infamous serial offenders was officially closed. In November 2012, a shocking discovery made halfway across the world in Denmark would expose one of Georgia's most disturbing child exploitation cases. Launched in November 2012, Operation Sunflower, a sweeping initiative, was designed to locate and rescue victims of child abuse, while pursuing those involved in the creation, possession, and distribution of explicit child images. It was a massive effort, uniting law enforcement agencies across the country under one coordinated front to root out those exploiting children in the darkest corners of the internet. Operation Sunflower was itself an extension of an even larger ongoing effort, Operation Predator, a Homeland Security investigations initiative created to protect children from predators. This nationwide campaign sought to track down offenders who not only consumed or shared illegal material, but also those who traveled internationally to engage in acts with minors, participated in child trafficking, or reoffended after prior convictions. Through these interconnected operations, federal agents worked tirelessly to expose individuals using advanced digital forensics and coordinated intelligence sharing to dismantle online networks of abuse. In November 2012, when the Danish authorities stumbled upon a chilling discovery during an unrelated explicit child images investigation, while examining a seized computer, they uncovered a series of disturbing images depicting the abuse of 2 children by an unidentified man. The images were immediately forwarded to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Cybercrime Center, which serves as a global hub for tracking and identifying perpetrators of online child exploitation. Analysts at the center meticulously examined the files and determined that the images had been produced in Georgia, leading them to alert Homeland Security Investigations agents in Savannah. The Savannah office quickly took action. Using digital forensics, location data, and cross-referenced intelligence, special agents were able to identify the man in the photos as Stephen Keating, a 52-year-old resident of Jessup, Georgia. Within 24 hours of that identification, HSI, along with federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, executed a search warrant on Keating's home. What they uncovered confirmed their worst fears: a vast collection of explicit material and evidence that tied Keating directly to the crimes. He was taken into custody that same day, ending years of abuse and marking a significant victory for international law enforcement collaboration. During Keating's court hearings, the evidence presented painted a horrifying picture. Between 2009 and 2011, Keating repeatedly molested 3 children, all under the age of 12, recording and photographing the assaults to create explicit child images. These images were later distributed online, perpetuating the victim's trauma. The investigation did not stop there. Following his guilty plea, the authorities discovered that Keating had also indecently abused at least 12 additional minors whose assaults were not recorded. The magnitude of his crimes shocked even veteran investigators, revealing a predator who had operated unchecked for years under a facade of normalcy in a quiet Georgia town. Brock D. Nicholson, special agent in charge of HSI Atlanta, condemned Keating's actions, calling the case a powerful example of the evolution of global cooperation in child exploitation investigations. Nicholson said, but hopefully his victims can find some comfort in the fact that he will never again be a free man. He credited the swift coordination between Danish police and U.S. law enforcement for ensuring that Keating was identified, arrested, and his victims rescued in less than a day after the initial images were discovered. U.S. Attorney Edward J. Tarver echoed Nicholson's sentiments, emphasizing the gravity of Keating's crimes and the justice system's unwavering resolve to protect children. Tarver stated, "This defendant's lengthy sentence represents the lifetime of pain and anguish he has brought upon his victims. Depraved acts such as these will bring together every facet of law enforcement to ensure the severest punishment allowed by law." In July 2013, Keating pleaded guilty to multiple counts of child exploitation and 1 count of distributing explicit child images. Each exploitation charge carried a mandatory minimum of 15 years and a maximum of 30 years in prison, while the distribution charge carried a minimum of 5 years and a potential maximum of 20. In addition to his 110-year prison term, Keating was ordered to serve at least 5 years of supervised release and to register as an offender upon completion of his sentence. In July 1973, a woman was brutally attacked. Despite the broad daylight assault and mounting evidence, the case went unsolved for nearly 3 decades. Conchetta Penny Sarah was born on March 2, 1952, in New Haven, Connecticut, to Italian-American parents, John and Pauline Sarah. Her childhood took a difficult turn when her mother passed away in 1963, leaving her to take on responsibilities beyond her years. At just 11 years old, Penny stepped into the role of homemaker, caring for her younger sister Rosemary and supporting her father in keeping the household together. Her sense of responsibility extended beyond the home. Penny also helped her father with the daily operations of his auto repair shop, including bookkeeping and other business tasks. During her teenage years, Penny attended Wilbur Cross High School. Her plans for the future were modest but hopeful, as her 1971 yearbook entry listed her next step simply as college. Although college was her goal, Penny chose to delay that path to support herself financially. By 1973, she had taken a job as a dental assistant at a practice on Chapel Street in New Haven. In her personal life, Penny became engaged to Philip DeLito, who worked at his family's luncheonette near her workplace. The engagement, however, was troubled. Their relationship was marked by disagreements and difficulties that ultimately led Penny to end it. Despite this, the bond between them did not fully break. They continued to remain close, spending time together even after the engagement had been called off. On July 16, 1973, 21-year-old Penny drove her father's 1971 blue Buick Electra to work. She parked in the Temple Street parking garage, a structure just a few blocks away from her workplace. It was a busy weekday, with people moving in and out of the garage, yet what was about to happen would leave the city shaken. Around noon, shortly after parking her car, Penny was suddenly approached by a man inside the garage. Without warning, he attacked her with a knife, stabbing at her multiple times in a violent struggle. In a desperate attempt to escape, she staggered toward her father's vehicle but collapsed beside it, her injuries proving fatal. A parking attendant and several motorists soon came across the horrifying scene. Penny was lying on the concrete floor in a pool of her own blood, her life already slipping away due to one stab in the heart. Emergency responders were quickly called to the garage, but despite their efforts, she was pronounced deceased before medical aid could reach her. The authorities wasted no time in launching an investigation. The police began collecting statements and searching for witnesses who might shed light on the broad daylight assault. Several eyewitnesses came forward, reporting that they had seen a man chasing Penny toward the stairwell. Others recalled observing a man fleeing the area, driving a Buick erratically through the garage shortly after the attack. Physical evidence soon emerged pointing to the assailant's attempt to escape. Blood was discovered both on the exterior and interior of a 1972 Buick registered to Penny's father. The vehicle had been abandoned on the 8th floor of the garage with a bloody trail leading up to the 9th floor. The discovery suggested the attacker had moved quickly through the levels in an effort to avoid capture. The investigators continued their search, uncovering more disturbing clues. A box of tissues smeared with bloody finger marks was found inside the car, lying in the footwell behind the driver's seat. On the 9th floor of the garage, the police discovered a hairpiece belonging to Penny, further connecting the struggle to the crime scene. The investigators examined several potential suspects over the years, but each lead eventually collapsed under closer scrutiny. Her former fiancé came under suspicion early on, but he was cleared after investigators determined his blood type did not match the samples taken from the crime scene. In 1984, another suspect, Anthony Galino, was arrested after his wife made statements implicating him, and the authorities noticed a scar on his hand. For a time, it appeared the investigators might finally have their answer. However, Galino was eventually ruled out when tests confirmed his blood type also failed to match the assailant's. The case once again stalled. Not long after, suspicion shifted to a man named Selman Topicu, whose accent and similar license plate drew police attention. Despite the circumstantial details, the evidence was not strong enough to secure a warrant, and he was never charged. Each of these false leads only deepened the frustration surrounding the case, leaving Penny's family without closure. In 1987, 14 years after the crime, the investigation received new energy when John, Penny's father, personally urged the state's attorney's office to take control of the case. This decision led to a detailed reenactment of the events inside the Temple Street parking garage, giving the investigators a clearer picture of how the attack had unfolded. Through this exercise, along with updated forensic analysis, they concluded the assault likely began on the 7th floor and that the attacker had injured his left hand during the struggle. A decade later, technological advancements finally provided the long-awaited breakthrough. In 1997, the investigators revisited a key piece of evidence, a tissue box found inside the abandoned Buick. A latent fingerprint lifted from the box was run through the state's automated fingerprint identification system, which had only recently become available. The print matched Edward R. Grant, a 59-year-old auto mechanic from Waterbury, Connecticut, who had been fingerprinted following a 1994 domestic violence arrest. On June 24, 1997, was arrested. The fingerprint evidence combined with the fact that Grant had type O blood, the same type found at the crime scene, strengthened the case against him. Further DNA testing of material recovered from Penny's clothing, which had been inconclusive in earlier years, later confirmed Grant's connection to the crime. The investigators also noted that he had no prior relationship or known contact with Penny, making the act all the more senseless and shocking. In 2002, nearly 3 decades after Penny's life was ended, Edward Grant finally faced trial. The courtroom proceedings drew considerable attention, as the case had remained one of New Haven's most haunting, unsolved crimes for years. The trial centered on the crucial forensic breakthroughs that had connected Grant to the crime scene. The prosecution presented the fingerprint recovered from the tissue box inside the Buick, which had been conclusively matched to Grant through AFIS. They also highlighted the DNA analysis from Penny's clothing, which further reinforced the case against him. Together, these pieces of evidence created what the prosecutors described as an overwhelming link between Grant and the slain. Grant's defense sought to undermine the credibility of the investigation. They questioned the handling of evidence over the decades and suggested that police errors or even tampering could have influenced the results. Despite these claims, the defense did not directly dispute the scientific validity of the fingerprint or DNA analysis, acknowledging the strength of the forensic findings. On September 27, 2002, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Grant was sentenced to a prison term of 20 years to life. Grant, then 59 years old, swayed as if he had been hit when he heard the word guilty. But a few feet behind him in the courtroom, Rosemary, Penny's sister, wept as she absorbed the news. During the sentencing hearing, Penny's cousin, Joseph Sarah, spoke on behalf of the family. His words captured the deep pain that had weighed on them since her end. He told the court that Grant had stolen Penny from John, his first daughter, emphasizing the personal devastation the crime had caused. For the family, the trial's outcome offered closure, though it could never undo their loss. The police authorities also addressed the conclusion of the case. They expressed that, after decades of frustration and ends, justice had finally been delivered for Penny. It is assumed that Grant wanted to steal the car, as it was new and desirable at the time. Henry C. Lee, the nationally known forensic science investigator who along with many others helped to finally solve the case, recalled during an interview John Sarah came to me a couple of times. He said, "Dr. Lee, you are our last hope." Lee also recalled his final conversation with John in 1998 when he was terminally ill in the hospital. He called me from the hospital and said, "Please do not forget my daughter." I told him, "We are working very hard on the case. Nobody will forget Penny." In March 1984, a father walked into his daughter's home in Houston, Texas, and made a devastating discovery. Decades later, CODIS would bring a breakthrough. Wileen Faye Kennedy was born on January 22, 1951 to parents Charles Chambers Kennedy Jr. and L. Rose Lily Tesh Kennedy. Wileen would eventually establish herself as a creative and hardworking woman, pursuing several ventures that highlighted her artistic and entrepreneurial spirit. She ran a small business focused on antique and used clothing, finding value in vintage pieces and curating them for her customers. Alongside this, she operated a retail used clothing store, broadening her reach in the local community. Wileen's interest did not stop there. She also created custom jewelry and built a reputation as an interior decorator. Her specialty was in stained glass decor. Wileen was not an only child. She had 2 siblings, one of whom was her younger sister, Lily Dale Kennedy. Lily was born in 1961, 10 years after Wileen. But Lily's own path unfolded differently from Wileen's. By the age of 23, she was unemployed. Earlier in her working life, she had taken a job as a key punch operator. The two sisters lived together in Houston, Texas. Their home was located in the Heights neighborhood, a residential area known for its older houses and distinct charm. They shared a blue and white house at 600 East 12th Street. On March 5, 1984, tragedy struck the Kennedy family. That day, Jack made a horrific discovery when he entered his daughter's home in the Heights neighborhood. He found his two adult daughters, 33-year-old Wileen and 23-year-old Lily, lying deceased on the floor. The shocking scene left him no choice but to immediately alert the authorities. The police arrived at the residence quickly after receiving the call. When the officers entered the home, they confirmed what Jack had already discovered. Both sisters' lives were brutally taken in what was clearly a violent attack. At the scene, the investigators noted that each victim had suffered gunshot wounds, making it evident that firearms had been used. The younger of the two, Lily, had been shot in the back of the head. The wound was fatal and caused her life to be ended quickly. In contrast, her sister, Wileen, had endured far greater suffering at the hands of the perpetrator. The autopsy later revealed that Wileen had not only been shot, but had also been stabbed and bludgeoned. In addition to this, she had been assaulted. As the investigators examined the crime scene, it became apparent that the home had been ransacked. Items were missing, and the police determined that property had been taken. This pointed to the possibility of robbery as part of the motive, though the extent of violence inflicted on Wileen suggested far more than a simple burglary gone wrong. During the course of the investigation, the detective spoke with neighbors in hopes of gathering more information. One neighbor reported seeing a man leaving the house on the day of the crime. The man was carrying a duffel bag, raising the neighbor's suspicions that a burglary might have been in progress. When confronted, the stranger explained that his wife had kicked him out of the home. Accepting the explanation, the neighbor allowed the man to leave. Despite the leads, the investigators struggled to make progress. They conducted an extensive investigation, pursuing every angle available at the time. Yet no suspects were identified and no arrests were made. As a result, the case would remain unsolved and growing cold and dormant for decades. Cold case investigators revisited the case in 2009, 25 years after the brutal crime had first gone cold. Using evidence preserved from Wileen's assault examination, they were able to extract a DNA profile. This profile was then submitted to Cody's. Despite the effort, no matches were identified, and the case once again slowed to a standstill. The investigation remained stagnant until late 2014, another 5 years later, when an unexpected lead surfaced. A man who was facing charges in an unrelated matter came forward with information connected to the Kennedy case. He identified an individual named Edmund Deegan as a potential suspect. This tip gave the investigators a new direction and renewed hope that justice might finally be within reach. The detectives soon discovered that Deegan was still living in the Houston area. With this knowledge, they moved to obtain forensic evidence directly from him. The DNA collected from Deegan was entered into Cody's, where it was matched against the evidence preserved from the Kennedy crime scene. The results confirmed what the investigators suspected. Deegan's DNA was a direct match to the evidence connected to the case. In January 2015, the authorities arrested him, and he was formally charged. His trial focused on ending the life of Wileen, and in 2017, the court reached a verdict. Deegan was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. An HPD sergeant later explained that Deegan had actually been questioned back in 1984, shortly after the crime took place. But at that time, he was not considered a suspect. Although the conviction provided some measure of accountability, the outcome left the Kennedy family devastated once again. Due to Texas's mandatory release law, which allows inmates to earn early release based on good behavior credits, Deegan was freed from prison far earlier than expected. On December 1, 2021, after serving only 7 years of his 15-year sentence, Deegan walked free. The release was a painful blow to the sisters' loved ones. Their niece, Elliot, along with other family members, expressed deep anguish that the man convicted of such a violent crime would serve so little time. The Kennedy sisters were laid to rest in Hallettsville, Texas. At their father's request, their tombstones were engraved with the word, slain, a permanent reminder of the violence that ended their lives and the injustice their family continued to endure. In October 1999, a 4-year-old girl went missing during a short train ride between two villages in Belarus, Europe. The case would be solved decades later, thanks to an online article about a missing person case. Yulia Moisenko was born in 1995, the daughter of Viktor and Ludmila Moisenko, who raised her in Belarus. Yulia's life appeared to be that of an ordinary child, until tragedy struck at an age far too young. In October 1999, Viktor took his daughter on a short train ride between villages in Belarus. It was meant to be a simple trip, nothing unusual or out of the ordinary. The father and daughter boarded the train, and during the ride, Viktor had a drink and eventually drifted off to sleep. While he slept, time passed quietly inside the train, but when he finally awoke, everything was drastically different. He was startled to find himself covered in blood. Even more horrifying was the realization that his young daughter was no longer by his side. Panic set in immediately as Viktor comprehended the situation. The shock of waking up in such a state, combined with his daughter's disappearance, left him with no time to waste. Without delay, he reported what had happened to the police. His first priority was to ensure that the authorities were alerted to his missing child. The police wasted no time in beginning their investigation. With Viktor's report in hand, they launched efforts to locate Yulia and uncover what had happened on that train ride. From that point forward, the search for Yulia became the central focus as the investigators tried to piece together the tragic mystery. At the start of the investigation, the police looked closely at Yulia's father. Given the circumstances, his clothes stained with blood and his lack of memory, the suspicion initially fell on him. However, forensic testing cleared him. A DNA test on the blood covering his clothing proved that it did not belong to Yulia, ruling out the theory that he had harmed his daughter. Despite being cleared, Viktor could provide little help to the investigators. He admitted that he could not remember if he had been in a fight or how the blood ended up on his clothes. He also had no memory of the crucial moments in which his daughter disappeared. With so few answers, the investigators were left with more questions than before. Alarmed by the disturbing case, the police expanded their efforts beyond the local villages. A widespread search mission was launched across the country. Teams were deployed, leads were followed, and attention was focused on train stations and rural areas. Still, no sign of the missing 4-year-old could be found. The trail grew cold, and the mystery deepened. While official searches faltered, Yulia's mother, Ludmila, refused to give up. She continued her search independently, handing out posters with her daughter's photo at train stations. Her efforts were tireless and persistent, but despite her determination, no valuable information surfaced. The lack of progress left the family in anguish. That same year, a possible breakthrough appeared hundreds of miles away. 2 policemen in neighboring Russia discovered an abandoned 4-year-old girl at a train station in the city of Ryazan, located almost 1,000 kilometers from Minsk. The girl was unable to provide a full account of her past, but recalled one important detail. She remembered that her mother's name was Luda and her father's name was Viktor. Those few words were the only clues the Russian police had about her origins. Unable to trace her biological family with such limited information, the girl's case took a different path. She was placed with a Russian family, Irina Alpatova and her husband, who formally adopted her. From that point forward, she was raised as part of their household, while her biological parents remained untraceable. Irina was a pharmacist from Ryazan. When her younger son was born with serious health problems, she made a promise to adopt one child if he survived. He has, and the thankful mother had to fulfill her oath. 2 years later, the Moisenko family moved from their old house that was located close to a train station. Ludmila said, "I could no longer watch the trains. We moved to a place that had no train station anywhere near." In the years following Yulia's disappearance, her parents, Viktor and Ludmila, searched frantically for answers. In their late 50s, they continued to live under the weight of suspicion, as many believed they might have been involved in their daughter's disappearance. Local police who had initially been unable to solve the case also turned their focus back on the parents, suspecting foul play despite the lack of concrete evidence. For a long time, the Moisenkos carried both grief and stigma. They not only lived without their child, but also endured the painful implication that they could have harmed her. Although they had maintained their innocence from the beginning, the lack of progress in the investigation left the case clouded by doubt. In 2017, nearly 2 decades after Yulia vanished, the case was officially reopened by the police. Modern investigative approaches were applied, and both Victor and Ludmila agreed to undergo lie detector tests. Each of them passed, reinforcing what they had insisted all along, that they were not responsible for their daughter's disappearance. The breakthrough that would change everything came in 2019. By this time, Yulia was 24 years old and living in Russia. Her boyfriend, Ilya Krukov, began to search online for information connected to her past. In doing so, he came across details about a missing child case that bore striking similarities to Yulia's own life story. Curiosity turned into action, and soon the connection between Yulia and the Moisenko family was tested scientifically. A DNA examination was conducted to determine whether the young woman was indeed the same child who had disappeared from Belarus in 1999. The results confirmed the truth. Yulia was Victor and Ludmila's biological daughter. The long-awaited reunion took place at a police station in Margina Horka, a settlement in Belarus. It was there that Yulia and her biological parents saw each other again for the first time since her disappearance 2 decades earlier. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, a moment that words could barely capture. Yulia recalled, "We were all in tears. The overwhelming flood of emotions left them unable to speak. Instead, the family clung to each other, letting years of separation melt away in silence." For Yulia, it was the physical closeness that mattered most, the reassurance of finally being back in the arms of her parents. As they embraced, Victor and Ludmila shared what they had carried in their hearts for years. They told Yulia that they had never stopped searching, never abandoned the hope that they would one day find her. Their unwavering belief had been their strength during the decades of uncertainty. Ludmila, overcome with joy, could not let go of her daughter. She hugged Yulia as if she were still the small child who had vanished so many years ago. At one point, she even pulled Yulia onto her lap, a tender gesture that revealed both her grief and her longing to make up for the lost years. Despite the joy of the reunion, Yulia's life remained firmly rooted in Russia. She chose to continue living in Ryazan, the city where she had grown up. There, she shared a home with her boyfriend, Ilya Krukov, and their daughter. Her adoptive life, though separate from her origins, remained deeply important to her. Still, the reconnection with her biological parents was not left behind. Yulia maintained regular contact with her family in Belarus, keeping the bond alive across borders. Although Yulia has no recollection of her disappearance, her adoptive parents told her that she used to remember a ride on a train with an unknown man and an unknown woman, sleepovers in abandoned buildings, beggary, and hiding from the police. Yulia's unknown companion left the girl on a train station in Ryazan. Her memories transformed him into a father figure, and therefore she was convinced her parents abandoned her. Yulia's life had a major turn, however. Every morning she receives text messages from Belarus. "Good morning to our daughter and granddaughter." On a warm August afternoon in 2019, Lindsay BBK, devoted mother and beloved teacher's aide, set off on what should have been a familiar, harmless walk through the coppice woods near her Lancashire home. By evening, her family's calls went unanswered. The front door stayed firmly shut, and an entire town was plunged into disbelief as volunteers fanned out in search of the missing 47-year-old. Days later, beneath a quiet cemetery path, her body was discovered in 2 plastic bags, brutally disfigured, yet wrapped with chilling care. How could a random stroll through sunlit woods end in such calculated horror? And who was the young stranger captured on CCTV dragging a blue wheelie bin toward the grave? This is the chilling murder of Lindsay Bubbick. She set out for a walk along a route she knew like the back of her hand, a path she had walked countless times without incident. But on this day, August 12, 2019, something was different. The day began like any other. Lindsay Bobek, a teacher's assistant enjoying her vacation, had planned to spend quality time with her family. That afternoon, she and her daughter, Sarah, went shopping in Blackburn. They looked forward to a relaxing evening, sharing tea and introducing Lindsay to Sarah's new boyfriend. After parting ways, Lindsay returned home briefly to change before heading out for her usual stroll through the woods. Around 4 p.m., she left her house and never returned. What unfolded next would shake the quiet town of Blackburn in Lancashire to its core. As we trace the mystery of Lindsay's sudden disappearance, we must ask, why did tragedy strike on this seemingly ordinary day, and who was behind it? Set in the picturesque town known for its scenic parks and rich history, this story reveals a darkness lurking beneath a peaceful surface. Lindsay had separated from her husband, Tim Bibek, in July 2018, though the two continued living together in Upton until March 2019. After their separation became final, she moved into a new residence on Burnley Road in the village of Huncote. A devoted mother, Lindsay cared deeply for her two grown children, Devon, 20, and Sarah, 17. She worked as a teacher's aide for upper grade students at Hampton Hill Elementary School in Burnley, where her creativity and passion for children truly shined. A gifted artist, Lindsay often went above and beyond, crafting intricate props for school plays that left lasting impressions. But on August 12th, everything changed. That afternoon, she went for a walk in Coppice, a wooded area near her home in Huncote, located on the outskirts of Accrington, and never came back. Later that day, as planned, Sarah and her boyfriend, Brandon, arrived at Lindsay's home for tea. When no one answered the door, Sarah grew uneasy. It was unlike her mother to forget something so important. She called multiple times with no response, then finally sent a worried text, "Where are you?" They waited outside for an hour, calling Lindsay's phone 6 times with no answer. Growing increasingly concerned, Sarah sent another text, this time just a string of question marks, but was again met with silence. With no signs of her mother, Sarah finally phoned her father, Tim Bibek, to tell him Lindsay wasn't home and wasn't responding. Tim, sensing Sarah's anxiety, picked up both her and Brandon and brought them back to his house for the night. As the hours crept by and worry deepened, Tim and Sarah returned to Lindsay's home near midnight, this time with a spare set of keys. But once again, there was no sign of her. Everything inside the house appeared normal. Nothing seemed disturbed, and there was no note or indication of where she might have gone. With unease turning into fear, Tim called the police at 11 a.m. on August 13th and reported, "My ex-wife seems to be missing. We can't find her. Something about it just didn't feel right." Lindsay Bibek was officially reported missing, and her disappearance sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community. The quiet suburb quickly mobilized. Hundreds of concerned citizens joined the effort to find her. Men and women, elderly couples, dog walkers, teens on bikes, and even mothers pushing strollers came together with one goal: to bring Lindsay home. Most of them had never met her, but that didn't matter. Driven by empathy and determination, the community continued to search tirelessly. For 2 straight days, crowds gathered at Coppice Woods, clinging to the hope that they might uncover a clue. Any clue that could explain what had happened. But as the days passed and searches turned up nothing, the reality grew harder to ignore. Finding Lindsay was not going to be easy. The odds of locating her alive were shrinking, and investigators soon declared her a high-risk missing person. Lindsay had never gone missing before, and her family emphasized just how out of character this disappearance was for her. Despite the growing concern, the search effort never wavered. Community members sprang into action. Thousands of flyers were printed and distributed across the area, while a dedicated Facebook group for updates and coordination quickly amassed over 10,000 members. Mere hours after the police appeal was made public, Lindsay's face was visible everywhere. Soon, it was impossible to walk through the neighborhood without seeing her poster on every lamppost, shop window, and traffic light. Meanwhile, police initiated a full-scale investigation. Specialist teams, including dog units, Lancashire Fire and Rescue, mountain rescue volunteers, and the city's own search and rescue crew scoured the area. Aerial support from drones and helicopters extended the reach of the search far beyond copies, covering surrounding countryside and commonly used walking trails. Then, for days after Lindsay vanished, Lancashire police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements, captured at 4:10 p.m., walking down Burnley Road toward Coppice. She wore a purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the days passed, hope faded. By August 19th, 1 week after she went missing, the chances of finding Lindsay Bebeck alive were slipping away. Though police were no closer to discovering Lindsay's whereabouts, they remained cautiously optimistic. There was still no concrete evidence of foul play, which meant hope lingered that she might be found alive. The search pressed on with urgency. That evening, after a social media call to action, hundreds of local residents gathered to participate in the first mass public search of Coppice. It was a powerful show of unity, driven by the desperate need for answers. Then something shifted. A local resident walking his dog near Acrington Cemetery noticed the animal darting into a wooded area. He called for the dog repeatedly, but it didn't return. Instead, it remained fixated on a spot in the brush, its head buried as it sniffed and clawed at the earth. As the man approached, he felt something soft beneath his feet. Alarmed, he stepped back. The air was thick with a foul smell. Flies buzzed in clusters, and beneath the dirt, partially exposed, was a plastic bag and what appeared to be a human foot. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay Bebeck vanished, the search came to a heartbreaking end. Her body was discovered under deeply disturbing circumstances, buried in a shallow grave within a cemetery. Naked and wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags, her remains had been concealed with earth and grass in a hurried and gruesome attempt to hide the crime. With this grim discovery, the missing persons case transformed into a full-scale murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, the pathologist who performed the autopsy, concluded that Lindsay had died from a broken neck. The force used was extreme. Her larynx was crushed, consistent with a violent blow from a foot or knee. Disturbingly, there was also evidence of a post-mortem attempt to amputate her right leg, likely using a saw, as time marks were found on the bone. A deep gash had been made, cutting all the way to the bone. The injuries Lindsay suffered were devastating, a brutal end to a woman beloved by many. Dr. Carter also noted that the body's advanced state of decomposition made it extremely difficult to fully assess the extent of Lindsay's injuries. While she couldn't confirm whether any sexual activity had taken place on the day Lindsay disappeared, she also couldn't rule it out due to the body's condition. What made matters even more unsettling was the fact that both police and volunteers had searched the cemetery area for days prior to the discovery, yet had found nothing. During those earlier searches, a few community members and a police dog handler had spotted a blue wheelie bin abandoned in the nearby bushes. At the time, its presence didn't raise major alarms. On the night of August 20th, just days before Lindsay's body was found, volunteers again came across the same dumpster. This time, they noticed a dark stain on its exterior, possibly blood, and immediately notified the police. Officers responded, inspected the bin, and observed a brown mark they believed to be dirt. To them, the bin appeared almost new, and with no clear evidence linking it to the disappearance, it was left untouched. Unbeknownst to everyone at that point, this seemingly ordinary trash container held a horrifying clue to what had really happened. Several critical clues surfaced in the cemetery during the early days of the investigation, but many were initially overlooked or dismissed. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson was walking her dog with her daughter when she noticed a blood-stained cloth lying on the grass. The blood appeared fresh and bright red, but she assumed it might have belonged to a homeless man known to frequent the area. That same day, another dog walker, Judith Bibby, spotted red clothing, possibly Lindsay's jacket, caught on a barbed wire fence near the Cargill Hill Trail. Judith also recalled hearing a childlike voice, though there were no signs of a struggle, shouting, or distress. It wasn't until August 25th, the day after Lindsay's body was discovered, that investigators returned to the scene and made significant finds. Near her shallow grave, they uncovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green, heavy-duty gloves, both stained with blood. Forensic testing confirmed the gravity of the discovery. Lindsay's DNA was present on the outside of one glove, while the inside contained the DNA of her killer. Nearby, a blue plastic bag held a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the soles. Further analysis revealed her body had been wrapped in a type of plastic sheeting, and between the body and the wrap was foliage and grass, none of which matched the cemetery environment, suggesting she had been killed and stored elsewhere before being buried. This led investigators to conclude that the body had been relocated from another site. At this point, detectives recalled a blue trash can that had consistently caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing the CCTV footage, police officers made an unexpected discovery that left the investigation team stunned. Multiple images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie bin along Burley Road. In the days that followed, another CCTV camera recorded the same individual returning to the cemetery 4 times. This footage led to the identification of a suspect. The video of the young man dragging a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, quickly became viral. It was broadcast on the news along with a request for assistance in identifying the individual, which proved effective. Shocked teachers and parents were able to recognize the teen, who turned himself in to the police later that day. His identity was kept confidential until sentencing due to his age, as he was only 16 at the time of the crime. The boy in the video turned out to be Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Wynn Hill Road in Accrington, a home that had been in the Price family for about 30 years. The young man had a significant range of mental health issues. Rocky had been diagnosed with autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity from a young age. His low IQ added to his struggles with learning and communication. He attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days each week and was described by his teachers as an extremely quiet, nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Price and concluded that he had a limited understanding of his own emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled significantly with understanding the link between events and emotions. A 2016 report further described Price as being unresponsive to strangers and in constant need of supervision and care. Timothy Bradley, who had taught at the school for 18 months, noted that they were always trying to find ways to engage him in education, but Price preferred hands-on activities over academic subjects. He rarely participated in conversations, even about topics that piqued his interest. Teachers also described Rocky Price as physically strong and unusually tough for his age. He regularly went to the gym, enjoyed taking care of the chickens on the family farm, and loved watching movies and playing Xbox. Price lived in his own world and wasn't always aware of the consequences of his actions. So what led him to attack Lindsay Baybeck? Nothing in particular. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time when Rocky Price was on the hunt for lonely women. He was on the lookout for a woman to kill, showing no concern for who it would be. This was a completely random murder committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, exactly 1 year after the crime, Price finally stood trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, a jury unanimously found Rocky Marciano Price guilty. Appearing via video link from Her Majesty's Prison Wetherby, the 17-year-old showed no reaction as the judge read out the verdict. There was also no reaction from his parents in the courtroom. Price pleaded guilty to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, but denied any involvement in her death. He claimed that a male stranger had approached him and offered him money to help bury the woman. In a prepared statement, he admitted to moving the trash can and burying the body, but insisted he had no part in Lindsay's death. However, a search of his home in Accrington uncovered plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. A tracksuit and other clothing were also analyzed and confirmed to match what Price had been wearing on surveillance cameras from August 12, 1617. Defense attorney Mark Fenholz argued that while Price committed a horrible and heinous act by burying the woman's body in the cemetery, he was not the one who killed her. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Rocky Price pleaded not guilty to the murder, but admitted to moving Lindsay's body. After 2 days of questioning, Price, through his attorney, prepared a statement to explain his movements between Coppice, where police believe Lindsay was killed, and the cemetery where her body was found. However, the prosecutor firmly stated that Rocky Price acted entirely alone. The motive for the random attack on the 47-year-old mother of two was never revealed, as Price did not even know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years, with his release contingent on the parole board's assessment of whether he poses a danger. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, emphasizing that there was no doubt Price approached with the intent to kill a woman walking by. Just moments before Lindsay's incident, Zoe Braithwaite had narrowly escaped a hooded teenager walking alone with his hands in his pockets on a parallel path. Trusting her instincts, Zoe became immediately cautious. She found the teenager's appearance odd, as he seemed out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away. That moment likely saved her. If it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was Lindsay. This was a premeditated attack. After failing to target one woman, he didn't abandon his plan to attack another lone woman. His actions following the crime clearly demonstrated his ability to plan and reason. His teachers testified in court that he excelled at practical tasks rather than academic ones, and he used the skill to hide the body. Rocky Price was found to have made 2 trips to Capas on the evening of August 12th. The first occurred at 6:55 p.m. when he was seen on CCTV carrying a black rucksack. It's possible that the rucksack contained a saw, which he may have used to dismember Lindsay's body. The second incident took place at 8:28 p.m. when dog walker Anthony DeWorst was seen pulling out an already empty garbage can. This was the same spot where Rocky's grandfather, who shared his name, and other family members were buried. Without panic or excitement, young Rocky Price, acting alone, began a methodical plan to dispose of Lindsay's body by placing it in a blue garbage can, as if it were just trash, and then burying it in a shallow grave at Acrington Cemetery, wrapped in 2 plastic bags. He carried out the plan to hide Lindsay's body, first by concealing her in a blue wheelie bin and then dragging her to the cemetery. After finding a quiet, secluded spot near the railroad line, he spent over an hour burying her body before leaving behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The murder of a stranger in broad daylight with no rational explanation is particularly chilling to all law-abiding members of society. The random nature of the attack indicates that the accused poses a significant threat to the public. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Babeck shows that his crime was not the result of a sudden loss of control. 24 hours after he was found guilty, publication restrictions were lifted by a judge, allowing his name and image to be made public for the first time. Rocky Marciano Price's identity had been kept secret during both the first and second trials. The jury was presented with many important details about Price, but these could not be fully disclosed due to his young age. The judge lifted the restrictions after the jury unanimously found Price guilty of the crime. His mental illness cannot in any way excuse or explain his actions. It is clear that he understood that killing was wrong, yet chose to commit the act anyway. Although such crimes are fortunately rare, they evoke fear in society. However, the central question in this case remains unanswered. Why did the young man feel the need to kill a stranger? And what was his motive? Only Rocky Price knows the answer, but he refused to provide it. Perhaps, if it hadn't been Lindsay Babeck, it could have been someone else. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hampton on September 20th. Over 200 mourners gathered at the church, while police stopped traffic on Manchester Road as Lindsay's coffin, draped in flowers, was carried into the church. Dozens of floral tributes from friends, family, and even strangers whose hearts were touched by Lindsay's story were left at the scene. Sarah described her mother as a very optimistic and positive woman, and Lindsay had been making plans for the future. Lindsay had been planning a trip to Glasgow with her friend, Sharon, and dreamed of finding love through the Match.com dating site. She envisioned a long and happy life ahead, filled with optimism about the future. However, all those dreams were shattered on one sunny summer day. Both Lindsay's family and the detectives who worked on the case welcomed the jury's unanimous verdict, but they acknowledged that no court ruling could bring Lindsay back or alleviate the pain of her family and loved ones. After the verdict was announced, Members of the defendant's family stood outside the courthouse wearing T-shirts that read, "Wrongfully convicted, set this boy free." The back of the shirt stated, "The killer is still at large." It's possible that Price is an aspiring maniac. Someone who wanted to take another person's life to experience what it feels like to kill and mutilate someone. Most likely, this behavior stems from a neurodevelopmental disorder, which affects social interactions, motor skills, and behavior patterns. The term autism essentially refers to someone who retreats into their own internal world, disconnected from those around them. Autism remains an under-researched developmental disorder that may result from genetic or hereditary factors, while the exact cause is not entirely understood. In this case, the punishment seems to align with the crime, even if Rocky Price only buried Lindsay's mutilated body. In the shadow of an isolated clinic in Nueva Paltina, a young medical intern named Mariana Sanchez found herself trapped in a tiny, unlit room, cut off from the world she once knew and subjected to relentless harassment. She pleaded for help, filing official complaints that vanished without a trace, only to be found days later suspended by a rope in the very space meant to shelter her, as her body was swiftly cremated, destroying the last hope of uncovering the truth. An entire system seemed complicit in silencing her cries. What really happened to Mariana Sanchez? And how far did those responsible go to bury the evidence of her fate? This is the murder of Mariana Sanchez. On that Thursday, Mariana was preparing to leave. She planned to spend one final weekend in Nueva Palestina, Chiapas, before heading home. The harassment hadn't let up, and she confided in her mother that she no longer felt safe. She mentioned she'd try speaking with the clinic director one last time. All she wanted was to leave that place behind. But then she went silent. Mariana had been made to live in a cramped room right beside the clinic where she worked. The following day, her body was discovered inside. What really happened to Mariana? She asked for help. Why wasn't anyone listening? So why was Mariana assigned to such a dangerous and isolated location? And why did the authorities destroy key evidence so quickly, cutting the investigation short before her family could find any answers? This young woman had dedicated herself to helping others. Yet when she needed protection the most, no one came to her aid. Mariana was born in Mexico City on July 16, 1995, and spent the first months of her life there. Her mother, Lourdes, had only one child. Her father was largely absent, especially after their separation, and little is known about him. During her early years, Mariana traveled between Mexico City and Tuxtla Gutierrez, where her maternal grandparents lived. But by the age of 6, she made the decision to stay permanently in Tuxtla Gutierrez with her mother. Though details about her childhood and adolescence remain limited, she was remembered as a cheerful yet quiet and reserved girl. After graduating from high school, Mariana initially pursued dentistry at a local college, but later realized her true calling was in medicine. She transferred to the Universidad Autónoma de Chiapas to become a doctor. Mariana was a dedicated student who performed well academically and gained hands-on experience by working in private clinics. Her ultimate goal was to specialize in pathology. Like many young adults, she enjoyed spending time with friends, going to parties, and staying active at the gym. Those who knew her described her as kind, intelligent, and deeply loyal, the type of friend who would always have your back. Even when faced with tough challenges, Mariana confronted them with courage. On social media, she often shared memes, uplifting quotes, and posts about her love for junk food and sweets. She also used her platform to advocate for causes she believed in, such as legalizing abortion and raising awareness about the importance of donating blood, bone marrow, and organs to save lives. As part of her final year in medical school, Mariana was required to complete her social service at a public clinic in Monterrey. Just a few hours away from where her mother had recently moved, Mariana and Lourdes weren't just mother and daughter. They were inseparable, true best friends. Their bond grew even stronger after Lourdes was diagnosed with cancer, and they faced every hurdle side by side. Because of their close relationship, Mariana made it a priority to visit her mother every weekend she could. The social service was a mandatory step before she could begin her medical residency. Students were assigned placements through a public selection process, determined in part by academic performance. For this work, Mariana received a modest monthly stipend of about $100 to $150. In August 2020, at the age of 24, she was assigned to the health center in Nueva Pales, Tena, an indigenous community within the municipality of Ocosingo, Chiapas. The location was remote and poorly equipped, making the assignment a significant challenge for most. But for Mariana, it quickly became overwhelming. Upon arrival, she was placed in a small, bare room that was hardly livable. Reports described it as having 4 unpainted gray walls and no bed, forcing Mariana to either bring her own or improvise with whatever she could find. The room was infested with insects and lacked even the most basic necessities, including a bathroom. With no internet or reliable cell service, she was completely cut off from the outside world. To use the restroom, she had to walk across an empty lot and share poorly maintained facilities with colleagues. Her room didn't even have a proper door, just a sheet of black plastic serving as a makeshift curtain. The clinic itself was little more than a modest structure built on an isolated plot of land. The local community, despite having very limited resources, had come together to build the clinic in hopes of gaining access to much-needed medical care. But while the intentions behind the clinic were noble, the reality was far more troubling. The living conditions were harsh and the area itself was known to be dangerous. There had already been reports of violence against healthcare workers in the region. From the moment Mariana arrived, she felt like she didn't belong. Her mother later recalled that as soon as she stepped into the building, Mariana had an overwhelming urge to leave. News of thefts and even lynchings in the area left her feeling isolated and frightened. Her room had a broken door, leaving her completely vulnerable at night. These conditions intensified her sense of fear and anxiety. But even worse than the lack of safety or basic amenities was the constant harassment she endured. Mariana felt even more vulnerable after confiding in her family that a coworker was harassing her. She wanted to request a transfer, but navigating the bureaucracy and lack of institutional support made it nearly impossible. Her mother urged her to leave the clinic altogether. But Mariana was determined to complete her social service and begin her medical career. Though she had little opportunity to communicate due to her heavy workload and lack of cell service, she managed to tell her mother she planned to speak with the clinic director about a transfer. Despite reporting the harassment multiple times, neither the local authorities nor her university responded with the seriousness the situation demanded. Her request for reassignment was ultimately ignored, leaving her trapped in an increasingly hostile and dangerous environment. By November, the situation had taken a frightening turn. Mariana sent a distressing message to her mother and a close friend, describing a traumatic incident. One night, the same coworker who had made her feel unsafe for months entered her room while heavily intoxicated. Before she could react, he climbed into her bed and began touching her aggressively. Mariana fought back with everything she had, trying to get him to stop, but he refused to leave. Her roommate, a nurse, wasn't there that night, leaving Mariana completely alone and vulnerable. Even before this horrific incident, she had filed an official complaint in an effort to escape the danger she was living in. But instead of offering support, the clinic director dismissed her concerns, insisting they needed her there and denying her transfer request. Left with no alternative, she remained in an environment that was becoming increasingly unsafe. According to her mother, the harassment from the man next door continued night after night. She suspected that Mariana hadn't shared the full extent of what was happening, likely out of a desire to protect her. The abuse may have gone far beyond what Mariana ever admitted. Despite the fear and isolation, she showed incredible courage, doing what few women in Mexico dare to do, speaking up. Mariana officially reported the harassment to both the clinic staff and the public prosecutor's office, but no meaningful action was taken. The clinic managers responded by simply bringing her to Molly's and suggesting she take some time off to recover. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office dismissed her complaint and placed the case on hold without any further investigation. Mariana wasn't alone in recognizing the negligence of those responsible for her protection. Witnesses revealed that the harasser even forced his way into her room by breaking the door open. The clinic director's only response was to advise her to take a few days off and promise the man would be fired, something that never happened. Frustrated and distraught, Mariana filed another formal complaint with Anachiopes, the body responsible for overseeing her safety during this final stage of her studies. Yet nothing substantial came from it. The situation became a terrible nightmare, and the very thought of returning to the clinic filled her with terror. Then, in January 2021, a devastating event unfolded. On Thursday, January 28th, Mariana had already packed her bags and was preparing to return to Tuxtla Gutierrez that weekend after finishing her final appointments. She spoke with her mother that day, but Lourdes immediately sensed something was wrong. Her daughter sounded tense, hurried, and emotional. Mariana confided that the harassment was still ongoing and that she planned to speak with the clinic director once more in hopes of finding a resolution. She promised to call her mother after work, but that call never came. By Friday, January 29th, Mariana still hadn't responded. Late that morning, one of Mariana's friends broke the heartbreaking news to her mother. Mariana had been found dead, hanging by a rope in the tiny room where she had been living, right beside the clinic. The news hit her family like a crushing blow. They were overwhelmed with shock and filled with countless questions. Despite her own poor health, Lourdes immediately booked a flight to the south of the country. After a grueling journey of over 8 hours with multiple transfers and layovers, she finally arrived and was able to reclaim her daughter's body. However, the officials delayed the process and Lourdes wasn't permitted to see Mariana's body until the following morning. Unable to bear the thought, she chose not to open the coffin, fearing the pain of seeing her daughter like that. She spent nearly 20 minutes gazing at the closed coffin before it was taken away. The autopsy revealed little beyond confirming that Mariana had died from asphyxiation by hanging. The official report labeled it a suicide. Yet, while Lourdes and the rest of the family were absent, Mariana's body was cremated that very same day. Lourdes was certain she had never signed any document authorizing the cremation. The family was stunned by how rapidly everything was handled. There was no time for a proper farewell, and the rushed process only deepened their suspicions. The swift and definitive conclusion about Mariana's cause of death left those closest to her filled with questions. Her history of harassment and the ongoing investigation had clearly been overlooked. The family's lawyer highlighted significant flaws in the handling of the case. He emphasized that the cremation of Mariana's body was not only unlawful, but also violated Mexico's Federal Criminal Procedure Code. According to this law, anyone who dies violently, including cases of suicide, cannot be cremated because it destroys vital forensic evidence. The decision to cremate Mariana made further investigation nearly impossible. As public outrage intensified, the Chiapas prosecutor's office issued a statement claiming the autopsy found no signs of physical or sexual assault. They also stated that Mariana had never formally reported any sexual crimes to the police. Despite their reassurances, their words did little to quell the growing anger spreading across the nation. Medical interns from across the region, along with students from the Universidad Autónoma de Chiapas, launched an indefinite strike. They refused to accept the police narrative about Mariana's death and demanded a thorough investigation. Students from both the medical and gerontology faculties penned an open letter to the university administration calling for accountability for those who ignored Mariana's pleas for help. They labeled her death a femicide, not a suicide, insisting she was killed, something that could have been prevented if her complaints had been taken seriously. As public outrage intensified, people from all walks of life joined the demand for justice. Social media became a powerful platform to expose the inconsistencies and negligence surrounding Mariana's case. Thousands used hashtags like #JusticiaPorMariana to share messages, videos, and stories condemning the institutions that failed to protect her. The movement rapidly gained momentum, sparking widespread anger across the country. Before long, the call for justice expanded beyond online protests into real-world action. Many people saw Mariana's case not as the result of a single person's negligence, but as a failure of the entire system. Despite her repeated pleas for help, Both the government and the university turned a blind eye. The university, which should have protected her during her final months of study, failed to support her family in their pursuit of justice. As public pressure mounted, the case sparked a nationwide conversation. This exposed how long institutions had neglected the tragedy. In response, the Ministry of the Interior instructed the Chiapas Attorney General's office to follow legal protocols for investigating gender-based violence deaths and ensure the case was handled with a gender-sensitive approach. In a public statement, the police affirmed they were maintaining close contact with Mariana's family and promised to provide all necessary support and resources. They also confirmed that the Chiapas Secretariat for Gender Equality was involved, offering assistance to Mariana's grieving mother. Despite still recovering from surgery, Lourdes publicly expressed her gratitude to everyone who had stood behind her daughter's cause on February 2nd. In a heartfelt video shared on social media, Lourdes spoke out against government officials who tried to blame her for what happened to Mariana. To those questioning my role as a mother and asking where I was, she said, "I was living outside Chiapas, working hard to secure a future for my daughter. Some say I was wrong to let her work so far away, but she had her reasons for being there. The abuse she endured was never her fault." Her words resonated deeply with many and revealed the deep mistrust she felt toward the authorities. At that time, Lourdes still hadn't been granted access to the case file or an official copy of the investigation. She urged the public to keep pushing for genuine justice. Justice without scapegoating or manipulated court processes, expressing her frustration with the lack of transparency. Then, on February 13th, Ana, the clinic director in Nueva Palestina where Mariana worked, was arrested. The Chiapas State Attorney General's office accused Ana, the clinic director, of abusing her power by failing to report the mistreatment Mariana was enduring despite being aware of it. Although Mariana had repeatedly complained, Ana dismissed her concerns with gestures like offering soup and time off. She also promised to transfer the man harassing Mariana, but never followed through. In a bizarre turn, it was Ana who called the police after Mariana's body was discovered on the morning of January 29th. A judge ordered her to remain in pretrial detention, citing clear evidence of negligence. Independent journalists who examined the police report noted a glaring omission. The Chiapas Attorney General's office allowed Mariana's body to be cremated, effectively preventing any further forensic analysis. The case file also revealed significant flaws in the typical handling of femicide investigations. Despite Mariana's previous warnings that she was in danger, the investigation appeared more focused on eliminating external suspects than on identifying who might be responsible. The report painted Mariana in a negative light, describing her as confused, uncommunicative, and difficult while largely ignoring the gender-based violence she endured. The official stance remained that Mariana alone was responsible for her tragic death. The death certificate stated she died on January 28th at 8:30 p.m. from asphyxiation by hanging. However, crucial forensic details were missing, such as the type of rope used and the exact location of the hanging. What raised even more alarm was that early reports from the scene indicated her body was not found in the typical hanging position. Forensic investigators photographed Mariana kneeling with clenched fists and her arms stretched downward. Some first responders even mistook her posture as a sign of relaxation. To add to the confusion, investigators questioned Mariana's co-workers about irrelevant details, including her personal hygiene. Witnesses claimed she rarely showered, and one alleged she took antihistamines despite the absence of any medical records to confirm this. To Mariana's family, these comments appeared to be deliberate attempts to divert the investigation away from potential suspects and tarnish her reputation. Despite the numerous issues with the investigation, the family's lawyers managed to identify the man who had been harassing Mariana. His name was initially kept confidential, but eventually the truth surfaced. Social media users began sharing photos and the name Fernando Perez Jimenez, believed to be the doctor responsible for Mariana's suffering. On February 18th, police raided his home, but by then he was already on the run. A few hours later, Fernando unexpectedly surrendered himself. In a video posted online, he denied any involvement in Mariana's death and claimed he was being targeted unfairly. Despite his protests, he was formally imprisoned, but not for Mariana's death. At that time, he faced charges only related to sexual harassment. The Attorney General's office stated that the harassment case and the investigation into Mariana's death were being handled as separate matters. Still, Mariana's family remained determined to see justice done. Mariana's family never gave up, determined to uncover the full truth and hold the guilty accountable. At an early court hearing, the Chiapas Attorney General's office presented solid evidence connecting Fernando to the criminal case. Even more troubling details emerged. He had a history of sexual harassment accusations from multiple women, some dating back several years. Given the seriousness of the evidence, the judge ordered his preventive detention, sending Fernando to prison. Lourdes, Mariana's mother, spearheaded the relentless fight that ultimately led to his arrest. From the very beginning, she refused to stay silent, demanding justice and pushing for answers. Though she showed incredible strength and resolve, the investigation was hampered by lengthy delays and persistent obstacles. Throughout the ordeal, Lourdes continued to endure her own private struggles, carrying her pain quietly as the case dragged on without meaningful progress from the Chiapas government. Lourdes passed away on August 8, 2021, after a prolonged and painful battle with bone cancer, never living to see the justice she so desperately sought for her daughter. During Fernando's trial, the court reviewed Mariana's initial complaint, filed just 2 months before her death. Additional evidence revealed that in February 2013, another woman, a nurse, had formally accused Fernando of attempting to assault her at least twice while working at various healthcare facilities in Chiapas. Despite the growing body of evidence, Fernando maintained his innocence. In an early February statement to the police, he claimed he had never even spoken to Mariana. He voluntarily asserted that he was at a medical lab in Tuxtla Gutierrez the day after Mariana's death for routine tests. On November 25, 2021, Fernando was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but only for sexual harassment. After more than a year of investigation, neither he nor anyone else was officially charged, accused, or convicted in connection with Mariana's death. In Mariana Sanchez's case, the forensic evidence remained limited and contentious. Numerous issues were left unresolved, leaving the true circumstances of her death shrouded in uncertainty. It is best to be careful about both your enemies and your friends, since friends can become enemies. This story is about a friendship between women that ended in tragedy. Today's story is about Renee Marsden from Sydney, Australia. She grew up with her 3 brothers in the loving home of Teresa and Mark Marsden. This family had a warm atmosphere, but Renee had a very close relationship with her mother. Mother Teresa described her daughter as an incredibly kind, joyful, and tender-hearted young woman. When Renee turned 18, she worked as both a hairdresser and an administrator at a salon. Here she met Angus, a co-worker. At first, they barely noticed each other, but eventually Angus realized he was in love and got the courage to tell Renee. He was thrilled to find that she felt the same way, and soon they couldn't be apart, making plans for their future together. But their relationship was suddenly cut short. When Angus sent Renee a message admitting that he had been using her, wasn't ready for a serious relationship, and wanted other women, it broke her heart. Renee's world was turned upside down by this revelation, which made her once orderly life goals and beloved moments seem completely unimportant. She shut herself off from the world, skipping food and the outdoors in favor of the solitude of her blanket. She was close with her high school friend, Camilla Zidane. Even though their lives were going in different ways, Camilla rushed to Renee's side as soon as she heard she had broken up with her boyfriend, eager to cheer her up and help her get through her grief. Zidane told her to start dating new guys, and she had someone in mind that she thought would be a great rebound for Renee, Braden Spottieri, Camilla's ex-boyfriend. Even though things hadn't worked out with them because they weren't compatible, Camilla was sure that Braden and Renee were a perfect match and told her friend to go after him, believing that he'd be a great friend for Renee, who was shy around new people at first. Marsden wasn't interested in dating men, but as the pain of her recent breakup started to fade, she decided to take a chance on the mysterious Braden. From their first phone conversation, they started a relationship based on texting. Renee felt a deep connection with him even though they hadn't met in person. She already had that deep, unspoken connection that you get from a soulmate. They talked nonstop, day and night, and sent each other endless texts on social networks. At 23, Steri had graduated from a prestigious Royal Academy and came from a wealthy family with a successful construction business. Going over Braden with her mother Teresa to Renee, he looked perfect. They had a lot of the same interests and Braden wanted the same things in life as Renee did. The only problem was that Braden was always unavailable for dates. He never said no to meeting up, but there was always a reason they couldn't spend time together. In the early days of 2012, just a few weeks into their new relationship, Renee went on a 2-week family cruise, where she couldn't be reached because she didn't have cell service. When she got back home, she got some scary news from Braden. He and a close friend had been involved in a fatal motorcycle accident. His friend died and Spy was in charge. The investigation found that his lack of attention while driving led to killing charges against him. Because the court proceedings and hearings were still going on, he didn't tell her because he was afraid it would make her dislike him. But after being sentenced to 2 years in prison, he couldn't keep Renee in the dark any longer. Renee was devastated by the terrible news, but she chose to stay in the relationship. Once Braden was in Guba Correctional Center, he got access to a phone which allowed them to reconnect and improve their communication through text messages because making phone calls was dangerous for him. Braden turned down the chance for visitations that would have shortened his sentence because he wanted to be free by Renee's 21st birthday so that they could celebrate together. Renee understood and was ready to make sacrifices, at least temporarily, because she was sure that 2 years would go by quickly, and then they would get married, and nothing would keep them apart. For their future together, she was ready to put some limits on herself, because she knew that getting through this tough time was important. Even though Spiteri was in jail, they still spent a lot of time talking online about their wedding, honeymoon, and life in general. After that, Renee even checked with the consulate to see if Braden could travel internationally for their honeymoon, even though he had broken her heart before. Braden sent her flowers and gifts to try to win her over, and when he realized how hard it was for her because they weren't physically close, he suggested she satisfy her sensual needs with her best friend Camilla instead of other people. He said he wouldn't mind if Marsden agreed, but Renee politely declined, preferring to wait for his return home. Camilla, on the other hand, seemed very interested in the idea of being close with Renee, often asking about the details of her conversations with Braden and probing how Marsden dealt with her sensual needs. Camilla called Renee several times a day, and if she didn't answer, she sent her a lot of texts. Strangely, Camilla started to be jealous of Renee's other companions, and would complain if Renee spent the whole day with her mother, Teresa. One evening, Camilla called Renee 54 times, which caused Marsden to criticize her clingy behavior the next day, calling it excessive instead of apologizing for her actions. Camilla showed up at Renee's door, started a fight, and used rude language, which was strange from someone who was thought to be a close friend. After a heated argument, Camilla made the sudden move to kiss Renee, but Renee turned her down, saying she was only interested in men. Even so, Zidane was able to get her to agree to a physical encounter. After the event, Renee told her mother Teresa about their experiment, but she made it clear to Camilla that she didn't want to be in a relationship with someone of the same gender. They agreed to forget about the incident and move on. Zidane's strange behavior didn't stop, and Renee even showed her mother emails from Camilla, in which Camilla confessed her deep love and desire for a union, telling Renee that she couldn't deny her feelings and that no one else could love her more deeply. Camilla even threatened to shatter Renee if she did. Renee persistently if turned down, vowing to be there for Renee until she agreed to be her friend. Teresa, alarmed by these admissions, told her daughter to cut off the relationship and not give Renee any reason to keep it going. She reassured her that Camilla would eventually get married, find a man, and give up her illusions. However, Renee hesitated to end their friendship abruptly, so Teresa told her to proceed with the utmost care. Teresa's maternal instincts were confirmed. When Renee had to end the long-term friendship for her own health, which made Camilla react with anger, bitterness, and anxiety, while continuing her relentless pursuit of Marsden. At first, Renee chose to ignore Camilla's attempts to communicate, and her relationship with Braden started to suffer. especially when Braden kept bringing up Camilla's suggestion that they fix their friendship, even though Renee was trying to end their relationship because of Braden's constant urging. Unexpected tragedies in Braden's life made her change her mind, and Teresa pulled her back because of her caring nature. Firstly, Braden told everyone that his mother had been diagnosed with a brain tumor, which made him feel bad because he couldn't physically help her. Secondly, Braden was attacked in jail and badly hurt. Renee thought Braden's influence was getting worse and was about to break up with him. But unplanned events and her parents' advice to either leave Braden or look at other suitors stopped her from making a final choice. In an effort to get back together with her, her parents thought that cutting off her mental ties with Braden would make her want to end their relationship for good. Braden contacted Renee's parents to reassure them of his good intentions and their compatibility with her. He also kept sending romantic messages to pleading with her to make peace with Camilla and forgive her. Eventually, Renee was able to get back together with Camilla, who had been the only person who supported her relationship with Braden. 3 months into their new relationship, Renee, who was deeply in love with Camilla and needed her mental support, went to a tattoo shop and got spattery inked on the right side of her chest. While she was on social media, Teresa, Renee's mother, found a picture that Renee's ex-boyfriend Angus had posted. She liked the picture without any ulterior motives. When Braden saw Teresa's online behavior, he thought it was an attempt to start up a romance between Angus and Renee again. He sent Teresa a very angry and insulting message, calling her a traitor and criticizing her parenting for not supporting her daughter's feelings for Shpatairai. This message was rife with anger and made a number of rude comments. This episode made Renee's partner's parents think even less of him. They thought he was rude and cocky even though Renee tried to make things better. After standing her ground for a while, Teresa's mother finally agreed to talk to Braden about a deal that would give Renee some freedom while he was in jail. If their relationship lasted during that time, Teresa would change her mind about her feelings toward him, which surprised everyone. The young man agreed, and he told Renee that he loved her forever and planned to marry her when he got out. In the meantime, he gave her complete freedom, seizing the chance. Soon, Renee started dating a coworker named Ian. The Marsons were happy with Ian because he was so different from Braden. He was polite and calm, and they were looking forward to a fresh start. But Spatterry, who was closely watching Renee's life, noticed the change and started threatening Ian online to stop him from pursuing Renee. Even though she had given him permission to do so, Renee begged Braden to stop making Ian feel scared. But over time, she and Braden were able to start talking to each other again, this time as friends. Renee stayed cool and kept talking to Ian. She thought that things with Spiros were over amicably. In October 2012, while on a business trip, Renee took a selfie in her hotel room next to a mirror and posted it on a social media site. Braden wasn't ready for what happened when he saw a pair of men's shoes in the background of the picture. He became very angry and accused her of cheating on him. Renee had to act as a babysitter again by making it clear that Ian owned the shoes, but SP was still upset, and he even got Ian's contact information to bother him, even though Braden tried to stop him. Renee and Ian's relationship grew and turned into an engagement over the holidays, but Braden's constant participation became a problem. Point made Ian demand a decision between himself and Braden, since Braden was about to be freed in the fall of 2013. Renee thought about her choices and finally decided to go with Braden because she thought he was her soulmate, and the idea of trying to fix their relationship was beautiful. Renee was having a hard time with her feelings, and Braden told her that his father wanted him to run the family's successful building business when he got back. He didn't say when Renee suggested that he think about his dad's offer. Braden scolded her for being nosy and interested, saying she was only interested in the relationship for financial gain and didn't care about how it made him feel. He also constantly scolded her for her relationship with Ian, calling it cheating and using her guilt to get closer to him. Renee couldn't do anything, but Braden sometimes changed his behavior to be kind and caring, which trapped her in a cycle of emotional abuse in the summer of 2013, while Camilla went on a family trip to the USA. The perfect time for Renee to finally end her friendship with Zidane was when Camilla came to the USA. Being far away made the breakup easier, especially since Zidane had gone back to her old controlling and possessive ways, which made Renee nervous around her. Renee sent her a message asking her to stop talking to her and treat them like strangers if they ever meet again because of her own problems. Braden told Renee that he would not be able to talk to her for a while because of a hearing for possible early release. This would leave her alone, just like she had moved away from Camilla. During this time of being alone, Renee kept sending Braden heartfelt texts, even though he wasn't responding. She was holding on to any sign of contact. She had to wait a long time for a response, and when she did, she was shocked by how rude and uncaring it was. That same day, Teresa got a message from Spat Terry saying that Renee was a danger to herself. This caused a worried conversation between Teresa and Renee, who told Teresa that her relationship with Braden was over, but that the self-harm claims were not true. Teresa was eager to learn more. Renee told her mother that she had finally understood Braden's true nature and reassured her of her safety. She then got ready for a night out with friends, going out to find comfort and fun with their company. Right on August 5, 2013, at 5:49 p.m., Renee sent a long, sincere message to her mother to show her love and ask for forgiveness. Teresa immediately tried to call her daughter, but didn't get an answer. To figure out what was going on, she called Camilla and got the same note. Even though they hadn't talked in a while, Camilla suggested that they look for Renee in a likely place, which led them to a house where Sidon said Braden's sister lived. But it didn't help. Teresa then told the police that her daughter wasn't with her, and they eventually found Renee's car in the remote Watson's Bay, far from the city center. Inside the car, they found an unused cell phone from 2 months ago, a Valentine's card from Braden, and a photo collage of him scratched into the dust on the window. "I love you, Braden." The Marsden clan and some other relatives went to Watson's Bay to look for Renee, who was wearing black ballet shoes. At that time, police were sealing off the area for an investigation, so the relatives were told to wait for the results at home. Teresa, restless, tried to call Braden, but he didn't answer or respond to her angry messages. After becoming aware of his part in her daughter's pride, Renee's father went to the detention facility that was supposed to hold Spare, but found that no one there had that name. Mark told the cops that he had doubts when they first looked into Watson's Bay. Renee wasn't found, but they did find CCTV footage that showed her last moments. People saw her walking alone to the edge of a cliff, jumping over a safety fence, stopping to look down, and then sending 3 last texts on her phone before throwing it into the water and following it. Her body was never found, and her sudden disappearance left her family and friends devastated. Renee's family was dealing with the fact that she might be dead forever. They turned their attention to finding out who received her last texts. An investigation into the text contents revealed that Renee had sent Braden 91 texts before she left for Watson's Bay, but had not heard back from him until just before she jumped. There was an odd similarity in the grammar patterns of texts from both Camilla and Braden, as well as mood changes that mirrored each other. If Camilla was rude to Renee, Braden would be angry, and vice versa. Even though the texts came from 2 different phone numbers, they were all sent by the same person, proving that Camilla made up Braden's story. One of the last messages on Renee's phone was from Braden ending their 18-month relationship and saying he needed space. This caused Renee to have a severe emotional crisis, which was seen by her coworkers as she shook and cried uncontrollably. Once she calmed down, she made a short 90-second call to the prison, supposedly to Braden, according to the call records. Later, Zidon's house was searched under warrant and multiple cell phones, a torn letter from Renee to Braden, and an intact letter from Camilla thanking Renee for introducing her to her soulmate and promising to pay her back. Also, the man who was thought to be Braden in photos was actually called Cameron, and he wasn't involved in the fake relationship. His identity was used without his knowledge. For the last 18 months of her life, Renee thought she was in love. On the day she died, she found out that Braden wasn't real. Camilla admitted that she lied to her best friend by pretending to be Braden. But because catfishing wasn't illegal in New South Wales at the time, the police couldn't charge her. She hadn't tried to get money from Marsden to be accused of fraud. She did it for fun. In 2020, Renee's parents got the police to look into their daughter's death and how Camilla directly contributed to it. Zidon was given immunity in exchange for details of her lies. Camilla got away with her crimes by saying that she and Renee were in love and that the Marsden family would never have allowed them to be together. They made up the character of Braden to hide their relationship, they said. Camilla also said she didn't know Renee was going to kill herself, but the victim's family thought the breakup between Braden and Renee was revenge for Marsden ending their friendship for good. Camilla was crazy about Renee but couldn't have her as a woman, so she lied to her about these online relationships and made a male version of herself. Sadly, this cruel joke ended in the death of a young woman. Camilla is now married, has a child, and is enjoying life after deciding to marry a man because she realized that same-sex relationships weren't her destiny. On November 23, 2006, a chillingly calm 911 call turned a suburban home into a crime scene. Paramedics and police arrived to find 28-year-old English teacher Ashley Scott battered beyond recognition, her once bright future snuffed out by a brutal assault. As whispers of infidelity, manipulation, and years of hidden violence surface, one question hangs over every twisted detail. How did a college sweetheart romance spiral into this night of horror, and who will ever be held accountable? This is the murder of Ashley Scott. Thanksgiving is typically a time for families to come together, multiple generations united around the dinner table in the home of the family elders. It's a moment to reflect, to share gratitude for the past year, and to show love and appreciation for one another. This is the tradition in many households, but not everyone follows these customs. In some families, love and unity are replaced with tension, resentment, and even violence. Holidays carry no special weight, and the lines of acceptable behavior have long been crossed. This story sheds light on a chilling tragedy that unfolded within one such family. It all began on November 23, 2006, at exactly 3:46 p.m., when a disturbing call was made to emergency services in Memphis, Tennessee. Emergencies don't take breaks for holidays, and so 911 dispatchers are always prepared for the unexpected. But even with that understanding, the operator who answered the call that afternoon was left deeply unsettled, a reaction he later shared with a colleague. What unnerved him wasn't just the nature of the situation, but the eerie composure of the caller. It was as if the man on the line was casually ordering food, not reporting a life-threatening emergency. He identified himself as Jeffrey Scott and claimed his wife had been unconscious since 11 a.m. In the background, another voice interjected, coldly stating she was likely already dead. When the dispatcher pressed for more details, Scott replied flatly, "She was breathing a moment ago. Now she's dead." His tone never changed. Recognizing the potential severity of the situation, authorities immediately dispatched a specialized unit to the scene. Within minutes, officers arrived at the residence, where Jeffrey greeted them and directed them to the bedroom, where his wife, Ashley Scott, lay motionless. When officers stepped into the bedroom, they found a man leaning over Ashley Scott, performing CPR. He introduced himself as Dr. Robert McGee. Longtime friend of Jeffrey's, McGee told responders that Ashley was still clinging to life, but only barely. Her pulse was faint, and her blood pressure was critically low. Paramedics quickly assessed her condition and confirmed his evaluation. They suspected she had suffered a severe head injury, likely from a blow with a blunt object. Her pupils were dilated and unresponsive to light. Blood was seeping from both her nose and mouth. The rest of her body revealed the extent of her suffering. Bruises and abrasions covered her legs, chest, and back. The medical team moved swiftly, initiating emergency resuscitation efforts in a desperate attempt to save her. They did everything they could. Intubation, defibrillation, powerful drugs to stimulate her heart. But nothing worked. Ashley Scott was slipping away, and despite their best efforts, the medical team could only watch as her condition worsened. She was rushed to the hospital, where a neurosurgeon was brought in to evaluate her upon arrival. His findings echoed the fears of the paramedics. At just 28 years old, Ashley was in the final stages of brain death. Her vital organs were shutting down one by one, and there was no chance of recovery. In the face of such irreversible damage, doctors made the heartbreaking decision to end life support. Not long after, Ashley Scott was pronounced dead. There was no mistaking the brutality Ashley Scott had endured. Her right ear was discolored, an unnatural green, commonly seen in boxers who take repeated hits to the same area. A clear imprint of a man's shoe was stamped into her back, suggesting she had been stomped on or worse, jumped on. Her frail body was littered with bruises in various stages of healing, a haunting indication that this wasn't a one-time act of violence, but something that had been happening over time. As doctors scrambled to save her, investigators began questioning both Jeffrey Scott and Dr. Robert McGee. The doctor quickly explained that he had been the one to push for calling 911. And described what had led him there. Around 2:30 p.m., he received a call from Jeffrey, an old college friend with whom he kept occasional contact. Jeffrey told him that he and Ashley had been drinking the night before, and afterward she became ill. According to Jeffrey, Ashley had gone to bed the night before and simply never woke up. It was only then, he claimed, that he decided to call for help. Although Dr. McGee was busy at the time, he put his responsibilities on hold and headed to the couple's home. When he arrived, he found Jeffrey sitting beside Ashley, who showed no signs of life. Right away, McGee sensed that something wasn't being said. He suspected the couple had argued and that something serious had happened, something they initially hoped to conceal, that he believed was the real reason they reached out to him. Instead of calling 911 right away, he was aware the Scotts had been going through a rough patch. Ashley had turned to alcohol, and Jeffrey had a reputation for losing his temper and hitting her. But once McGee examined Ashley, he realized the situation was far worse than anything he'd imagined. There was no hope left. Ashley needed urgent medical intervention and fast. Realizing the gravity of her condition, Dr. McGee insisted that Jeffrey call 911 immediately. As events unfolded, Robert began to piece together the bigger picture. It was clear that something far more serious had occurred, perhaps even a calculated act of violence. He later admitted to authorities that he intentionally kept Jeffrey at the scene, suspecting that the man might try to escape. Meanwhile, Jeffrey showed no emotion, not fear, not guilt, nothing. He seemed completely indifferent to the fate of the woman he once claimed to love. When officers questioned him about what had happened, Jeffrey recounted a dispute the night before. He said he had discovered messages Ashley had exchanged with another man and believed she was having an affair. Jeffrey claimed that, overwhelmed by the betrayal, he struck Ashley, but insisted it happened only once. According to him, she was heavily intoxicated, stumbled and fell. He portrayed her as a habitual drinker prone to erratic behavior and said he was tired of dealing with her outbursts. That night, he kicked her out of the house as he claimed to have done before and said she spent the night in the garage. The next morning, he found her still lying there, apparently asleep. Moved by pity, he said he carried her back inside and placed her on the bed. But as the hours passed and she didn't wake up, he realized something was wrong. Only then, he claimed, did he try to revive her and eventually call his doctor friend to come over. Nevertheless, the police dismissed his account. Upon their arrival, the woman was found covered in bruises from head to toe. Her face and head severely battered, and she was bleeding. Even if she had been intoxicated and fallen, it wouldn't have resulted in such extensive injuries. It was evident she had been assaulted. Scott was taken into custody and initially charged with aggravated assault. However, once the autopsy results were obtained, the charge was escalated to first-degree murder. The pathologist's report was grim, revealing that Ashley Scott's cause of death was a subdural hematoma on the right side of her brain. Such injuries result from a violent blow to the head, causing the brain to collide with the skull, leading to significant bleeding and swelling, which in turn restricts flow of oxygen. This triggers the failure of vital organs and systems in her body. It's an agonizing process. What makes it even more heartbreaking is that she could have survived if help had been administered promptly, ideally within the first few hours. Moreover, over 50 hematomas were discovered on her body, each varying in color and intensity, which corroborated the statements from medical personnel that she had been subjected to repeated assaults. The extent of Ashley's suffering was unimaginable. The most chilling part of it all was that the person responsible for her pain was someone who was supposed to protect her. After Jeffrey's arrest, detectives started investigating the crime scene. Evidence of a struggle was evident throughout the house. with items scattered everywhere and furniture upturned. A shattered vase was found in the living room. On the kitchen table, near a laptop, were printed messages between Ashley and her lover, which aligned with the suspect's claims about the motive behind the crime. Upon further inspection of the garage, officers discovered bloodstains on the floor. Inside Mrs. Scott's car, they found women's clothing, personal belongings, including a handbag with her documents and passport. It seemed the victim had been planning to flee, but never had the chance. The officers then decided to interview the family's relatives and friends, uncovering surprising details about their lives and circumstances, which provided more insight into the incident. Sadly, women sometimes fall in love with the wrong men and become entangled in relationships that start off full of promise. However, over time, the person they care for transforms into an oppressive tyrant, turning their lives into a living nightmare. Victims of both emotional and physical abuse often lose touch with reality and may even rationalize the abuser's behavior. In these situations, outside psychological support is crucial, as the victim is frequently unable to help themselves or break free. Ashley Scott, born Nate Pittman on November 4, 1978 in Bossier City, Louisiana, faced a difficult start. Her parents separated before she was born, but destiny eventually favored her mother, Donna, who met and married Jimmy Pittman. Jimmy adopted Ashley and loved her unconditionally from the moment she was born. Notably, Jimmy already had a 5-year-old daughter named Kika from a previous relationship. Sadly, Jimmy and Donna's marriage didn't last, and they divorced a few years later. It's important to mention that Donna was the one who left the family and eventually remarried. Ashley decided to stay with her father, though she continued to maintain a relationship with her mother. Despite the divorce, Ashley had a happy childhood, growing up to be kind and well-behaved. Those around her saw her as a true beauty and predicted a promising future for her. In 1996, she graduated from high school and went on to attend Watchett of Baptist University in Arkansas. It was there that she met her first love. Jeffrey Scott, who also attended the same school, happened to enroll at the university and their paths crossed. Jeffrey, captivated by her radiant smile, soon struck up a relationship with her. The young couple appeared perfect, always seen together and holding hands. Ashley's friends admired her, thinking she had found a dependable partner. Ashley played into their curiosity by sharing how sweet and kind he was, and how fortunate she felt to have him. In February, Pittman earned her long-awaited degree in education, bringing her childhood dream closer to reality. She had always wanted to become a teacher and dedicate her life to children. Then, on June 9, 2001, Ashley and Jeffrey tied the knot. However, things did not unfold as she had imagined in her youthful dreams. Unexpectedly, a darker side of her chosen partner began to emerge. While others were taken aback, the bride had been aware of it all along, but had chosen to overlook it. A year before the wedding, Ashley sent a letter to her sister, Kika, explaining that she could no longer maintain contact with them and asked them to respect her decision. As a result, her family was not invited to the wedding either. Friends of Ashley, who were fortunate enough to attend the ceremony, were taken aback. The overwhelming majority of the guests were from the groom's side, despite Ashley having a large, close-knit family. This struck them as unusual. However, they later understood why. The reason was that her family did not approve of Jeffrey, and he made no attempt to change their opinion. Behind the facade of a seemingly nice guy, something darker lurked. He often spoke disparagingly about her family and behaved inappropriately toward them, feeling completely justified in doing so. What was most shocking, however, was Ashley's reaction. It was as if she was making excuses for his behavior. During the wedding, Jeffrey insulted some of her friends once again and acted arrogantly. After the newlyweds relocated to Cordova, a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, Ashley's relationships with many people began to deteriorate. Those who didn't completely cut ties still kept in touch, but maintained their distance. After Jeffrey began working as a computer systems technician at his father's company, while Ashley, now Mrs. Scott, took a job as an English teacher at a middle school. She was well liked by everyone. Ashley was seen as beautiful, cheerful, intelligent, and sociable. She loved her work and had a strong bond with her students. Later, Paul Dooley described Ashley as a skilled professional and talented educator. He shared that she was the main reason he looked forward to teaching English each day. In court, he confessed that the school was the only place where she truly felt safe and appreciated, a refuge where Jeffrey Scott couldn't reach her. Over time, however, the relationship between the couple continued to deteriorate. Ashley's bond with her family nearly disintegrated. She refused to discuss it and referred to the situation as her personal choice. Undoubtedly, these decisions were influenced by a master manipulator, her husband. In the early years of their marriage, Jeffrey exerted complete control over her, isolating her from any external support. Constant criticism over the smallest of things gradually eroded Ashley's self-esteem. Scott did everything he could to suppress her. During this time, she communicated with only a handful of people, one of whom was her childhood friend, Lori. The two had been friends since 5th grade and stayed in touch into adulthood. In September 2006, a high school reunion was planned for Ashley's alma mater. She was excited to attend, and despite her husband's reluctance, she decided to go. While those at the reunion didn't notice any major changes in her, Lori couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Throughout the evening, Jeffrey called Ashley repeatedly, preventing her from relaxing or enjoying herself. He interrogated her about who she was speaking with, what she was wearing, what she was eating and drinking, and what she was discussing, essentially trying to control every aspect of her life. During this time, Ashley confided in Lori about the nightmare she was living, revealing that she couldn't continue like this. She admitted that she was considering divorce and had even reached out to a divorce attorney. She also confessed that she was aware of her husband's ongoing infidelities. For example, she mentioned an affair with a colleague named Blair Brown, someone she had once gotten along with. However, she explained that over time, she had forgiven Blair. Blair had contacted her to reveal Jeffrey's true nature and the danger he posed. It's important to note that this party marked the last night of Ashley's life. After that, Ashley stopped communicating with anyone for several weeks, and new bruises began to appear on her body. Detectives took an interest in the accounts shared by Ashley's relatives and friends, gathering valuable information through their conversations. Lori revealed that, shortly before Ashley's death, Jeffrey had called her multiple times to complain about his wife. He claimed that Ashley drank excessively, lost her balance, and often fell, which he used to explain the bruises on her body. However, the following morning, Ashley would have no memory of these events and would blame him instead. Jeffrey accused their mutual acquaintance, Blair, of corrupting Ashley, claiming she had turned her against him and fostered her growing alcohol dependency. He also expressed that he no longer wanted children because he felt disgusted by his wife after everything that had happened. Jeffrey accused Ashley of being unfaithful, lying, and struggling with alcoholism. Despite his claims, didn't believe him and felt he was only trying to cover for himself. Eventually, Lori realized that Ashley had become a victim of domestic violence and was in serious trouble. After each of Jeffrey's calls, Lori would try to reach Ashley, but her friend never answered, which was unusual. The last time they saw each other was just before the tragic events. The two went shopping, but Ashley didn't buy anything for herself. She seemed sad and deep in thought. Lori attempted to talk to her about her marriage, but Ashley didn't want to discuss it, insisting she didn't want to ruin the evening. She briefly mentioned that she was considering divorce, but was terrified of taking that step. Ashley knew Jeffrey well and was afraid his reaction would be completely unpredictable. Shortly after, Blair Brown, whose name had come up frequently in conversations about the Scott family, was brought in for questioning. Blair admitted that she had indeed been Jeffrey's lover in the past. Blair, having experienced Jeffrey's uncontrollable fits of rage firsthand, knew all too well how dangerous he could be. It was established that her friendship with Ashley had been rekindled about 6 months before the crime. Blair felt sympathy for her and offered occasional support. She also confessed that her relationship with Jeffrey had been a mistake and apologized multiple times for it. The two women occasionally met up for drinks. Ashley would often seek refuge at Blair's place to escape Jeffrey. One day, however, Jeffrey tracked her down and came for her. In that moment, Blair witnessed a brutal attack. Jeffrey struck Ashley multiple times in the face before throwing her out onto the street, completely indifferent to the fact that Blair was a witness. Even after this incident, Ashley continued to downplay her husband's guilt, making excuses for his actions. During another interrogation, Scott admitted that he had only contacted Robert McGee 12 to 15 hours after the argument. During that time, his wife was unconscious and alone in the garage. Jeffrey continued to insist that he had only struck her once in response to discovering her infidelity. Afterward, he sent her to the garage, threw bedding on the floor, and left her there. The bleeding woman was left to spend her final hours freezing and in pain while her husband rested comfortably in the house. However, the autopsy results contradicted his claims. It was evident that Jeffrey had consistently mistreated his wife. Further investigations revealed that Jeffrey occasionally hired escorts, even while Ashley was at the reunion. Despite this, he continued to blame her for all their problems. In fact, shortly before she decided to file for divorce, Ashley had met a young man named Michael Lowe. Ashley and Michael exchanged messages from October 29th to November 22nd, 2006. He was the one who encouraged her to leave her husband, assuring her that he would support her and had everything prepared for her departure. Michael told her that he loved her and wanted to offer her a different life. When Jeffrey discovered their messages, he became furious and decided to teach his unfaithful wife a lesson. The trial of Jeffrey Scott began on January 13, 2009. The prosecution argued that the crime was premeditated. It was clear that the argument between the couple had started in the living room, where a broken vase was found. The violence then escalated as they moved through the house, with Ashley suffering abuse in nearly every room. Blood stains were found in almost every room. The divorce attorney Ashley had consulted testified on behalf of the prosecution. The divorce attorney explained that she had met with Ashley the day before her death. At that time, all the divorce documents were prepared, and Ashley simply needed to pack her things and leave while Jeffrey was at work. Rachel advised Ashley to leave secretly, which explained the items and documents found in her car. However, Ashley did not follow the expert's advice. She wanted to confront her husband before leaving, a decision that turned out to be fatal. The attorney did everything she could to help Ashley, even offering her services for a symbolic fee. She also mentioned that she knew her client had been drinking, which had led her to quit her beloved job. Ashley had used alcohol to numb the emotional pain she felt in her marriage and needed support. For a long time, the women communicated in secret to ensure that Ashley's departure would be as safe as possible. Since her husband controlled all of her calls, they arranged to meet on neutral ground or used payphones to communicate. Many witnesses confirmed seeing scratches or bruises on Ashley, which she carefully covered with layers of makeup. Some people knew the real cause of her injuries, but felt powerless to intervene. In their final report, the medical examiners noted that Ashley had been frequently kicked. It appeared that Jeffrey would knock her to the ground and then stomp on her. Old bruises, consistent with shoe marks, were found on her back and legs. The defense team for the accused worked relentlessly to reduce the charge to second-degree murder. They attempted to paint the victim in an unflattering light, portraying her as an alcoholic and an unstable hysteric. In short, the defense did everything they could to make the jury believe that Scott also suffered in the marriage. They discredited the victim, couldn't defend herself because she was no longer alive. It was revealed that in February 2005, Ashley had been fined for drunk driving. Meanwhile, Jeffrey claimed he wanted to repair the marriage, bought a new home, and was open to having children, all for a woman who had a lover and exchanged intimate photos with him. Regarding the crime itself, he claimed he lost control, realizing his efforts were in vain, that Ashley had found someone else. "I regret the pain I caused you," he addressed his wife's family, "but I mourn her loss and pray for her soul." In contrast, during the trial, it was noted that after his arrest, Scott didn't ask about his wife's condition. Instead, he inquired about the outcome of a recent football game. His attorney resorted to underhanded tactics. During his statement, he even suggested that the victim sustained most of her injuries during a seizure caused by alcohol withdrawal. An independent expert was found to support this claim. To counter this, the assistant county medical examiner was called to testify. He read the autopsy results, listed all the injuries on the body, and most importantly, confirmed that the cause of death could not have been the result of accidental falls. The prosecutor argued that the defense's claim of an unintentional crime was absurd. It was evident that the victim had tried to escape her tormentor, but out of a lingering affection for her husband, hoped to end things on amicable terms. Meanwhile, the accused showed her the printout of her messages with Michael, then attacked her. As he repeatedly struck her, he knew he was inflicting excruciating pain and suffering. He then finished her off in the garage, where she lost consciousness. Scott saw the severity of her injuries, but chose to ignore them and failed to seek medical help. Instead, he waited and only then called a doctor. The prosecutor argued that the accused wanted his wife dead. However, an unexpected piece of evidence surfaced. Investigators discovered that Ashley had been trying to save the marriage. It was revealed that she had been taking special medication to get pregnant and had supported the purchase of a new home. Perhaps she had become so dependent on the toxic relationship that she couldn't imagine life without Jeffrey. Yet, she eventually decided to leave. It's possible that she didn't want to leave secretly, hoping that her husband would change and that everything would work out. The victims of abuse often hold on to such illusory hopes, clinging to the belief that things could improve. On January 19, 2009, Jeffrey Scott was found guilty of second-degree murder. Even the judge expressed dissatisfaction with the jury's verdict, criticizing them because the vote in favor of the original charge was 12-1. One juror did not believe the accused was guilty enough for first-degree murder. According to state law, a unanimous decision is required to convict someone of first-degree murder. This left the victim's family deeply disheartened. The accused will serve 25 years behind bars without the possibility of parole. However, many feel this punishment is insufficient for someone who tormented a woman for years. He isolated her from everyone, manipulated her, and made her believe that neither she nor her family was worthy of being part of his life. Ashley's father, in particular, was heartbroken, stating, "M revealed the deep pain and heartbreak that come from losing a loved one under such tragic circumstances. His grief highlights how difficult it is to accept the loss of a child in such a brutal way, knowing who was responsible.